Ollie, we're on. We're in. Welcome. How are you?
I am great, Simon. Delighted to be here and delighted to be chatting to you on this one actually very nice day, even though I am in a small shoebox with no windows. But
You are in a shoebox and no winners, but it's a Friday and it's late on a Friday afternoon. So this is a good thing. And we've both got to bring in this conversation nice and tightly because we've all got to get home for bath time.
Yeah. Not of each other, just to clarify that. I mean, it wouldn't be a problem, but our little ones need bathing. That's what they need. So yes.
You've been in a few baths with big burly men in the past. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Probably too many that I care to remember. But yeah, actually, they were really, really popular at the beginning of my career. Like, used to have them after every game. And then I don't know why. I think it was health and safety. It just literally stopped overnight. I mean, nothing.
It doesn't feel like that's a safe thing for you to be doing. Certainly not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like all being in the same bathwater of 23 people is, irrespective of whether you're big and burly or not, it's just probably not that hygienic. So I think that's probably the way they put paid to that one.
At some stage, showers came in. So So Ollie, we're going to be talking about today playing for England, World Sevens Player of the Year. You have 4 world records. And you're a director at PwC. You're the founder of Optimist Performance. You're a devoted parent. I'd be interested to see which is the hardest out of all of those things. But there's a lot. There's a lot on your list of great things you've achieved.
Yeah. Just writing it up, just trying to chalk them up. That's it. But I mean, thanks very much. It's been great fun doing it all. I'll be honest. The records and titles and whatever are brilliant, but they're kind of irrelevant, if I'm honest. It's actually all the fun and the memories and the stories with the people that they're the things that I love the most. Like, getting voted as World Player of the Year was a great privilege, but it would never have happened if I didn't have an incredible squad of people around me and players that I was playing with that to be honest were the ones doing all the incredible work on the field. I was just fortunate to be the right place, right time. And what I look back on is all of the amazing memories. I can see them in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and we'll still share those sort of special moments that we had of being the first England side ever to beat New Zealand in their own back garden in Wellington in front of 50,000 people was just incredible. And then to do it again in our own backyard in extra time at Twickenham in front of, I think it was 70,000 people, 65,000 people. It was just amazing, just unbelievable. So, I mean, that's what's special. And I mean, yes, it's nice to have a trophy, but they're the really amazing things when I see them, away from the rugby field now as a retired old has-been.
Well, where did it all start for you? Where did you grow up, and where was your first interests? Was it, sporting, or what is it? Where did you sort of grow up and everything?
I'm from Brighton originally, seaside boy on the south coast. So I started at Hove Mini Rugby Club, and then my school, St Christopher's at the time, it was quite a sort of disciplined school actually. So, but we were actually the last school ever to box. So that was an interesting stat in the UK. But yeah, we had a pretty small but strong rugby following. And then I moved to a school called Brighton College, where my rugby sort of growth and love sort of really sort of took off. There's a guy called Jeff Wappett who was there. And yeah, from there, it just grew and grew and grew.
Was it always rugby for you, or I mean, are you from a rugby family, or was it just a sport that took your interest? How did you first get into it?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, basically, I've got 2 left feet, so I was absolutely useless at football. So they just used to put me in goal. So that became a bit demotivating. And then I was quite boisterous as a kid, and so I think my mum was like, "I've got to get him out of the house because he's just bullying and pummeling his little brother." And so at the age of 4, I think, rugby was just the perfect way of just getting me outside, rolling around. A few other other kids could beat me up and get muddy in the process and let off some steam, let off some energy. So that was, if I'm honest, where it all began. My family are not one. I mean, no one's got a rugby background. We like our sport. My dad was a bit of a runner, I guess, but yeah, it's nothing really in terms of professional like that, but I just love the game, and I love the game. I love the camaraderie. I love the team, and as always with these things, I didn't have, I didn't have all these ambitions of like being a professional rugby player as a young age. I mean, I suppose maybe I did, but no more so than any other kid that's playing. Pretending to be Will Carling or Rob Andrew or whatever it was when I'm sort of 6 years old running around the rugby field, but I think it was just more. I just love the game. I just love the fun, and equally all the again, the special, I've got such amazing memories as a kid playing rugby, running around on a rugby field.
So you started playing in the schools, and then that sort of went into college. Were you similar positions then? Were you sort of winger, fullback, or were you different positions? How did it sort of transpire as you grew?
Yeah, I've been honest. I didn't. I was never a winger, actually, all the way through. It was only when I got to Newcastle Falcons, and we basically had Jamie Noon, Toby Flood, Mark Meyerhoffler, Johnny Wilkinson, Matthew Tate, who were all sort of playing in the midfield on 10, 12, 13. And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to get a sniff on that one, so I might as well just go out on the wing and see if I can get a game out there. And so I did, and luckily I was sort of quick enough to merit it. But
I mean, you were lightning fast.
Thanks, mate. When I was growing up, I was a 13. Occasionally played 10, but predominantly outside centre. That I love playing in the middle and everything else like that. And then it was only generally, even when I was at university, I was a centre. It was only when I went to the Falcons that they moved me out on the wing, and I just seemed to stay there from that point on as a sort of wing fullback.
And even at that early age, was it just enjoyment? Like, I like the game, I like playing. Did you already have like a mindset of the winning mindset, the winning mentality, which is sort of taking you through your career to become a professional? How did that develop early on?
When did but basically it's sort of that natural progression, right? As you go as a young kid, you play sort of schoolboy, then when you hit about 14, 15, you start to play county rugby. And then at 16, there's the England under 16s to go for, or Wales under 16, whichever country you want to represent. So you play sort of county, regional stuff, and then you get picked for England under 16. And I was in the mixer at England under 16 at that point. So I just loved it. I mean, even when I got into England under 16s, I wanted to do it. I really wanted to go and try and play. I would love it if I got signed by a club or anything else like that. But I don't know if I honestly believed that it would happen. And then when I was 17, Harlequins came in and sort of scouted me, and I started playing some second team for them. And it just sort of to become a reality. And then as it got a bit of a bump in the road, because at 17, 18, probably got a bit sort of lackluster and carefree and neglected my studies a bit. And so I was predicted AAB in my A-levels, and I was going to go to the London School of Economics for my degree. I got a BBD in the end. And it was sort of because basically I'd sort of found girls at 16 because they'd been introduced to my school. So that probably was a suitable distraction. And then also, rugby was becoming a bit more serious. So taking up a bit more time. Every weekend I was playing for Sussex or for Southeast England or whatever else like that. So it just started to consume everything. So I was going to sign a contract for Harlequins, and I decided, look, this is a bad move because LSE is in the Strand in London, and Harlequins are out in Aldershot, and there's only going to be one winner here, and I'm probably not going to bother going to uni. I'm just going to go to Aldershot all the time, and it'll all, so learn from your mistakes, go and get a degree. So I cut cords with both, and I ended up going up to Durham.
Okay.
I just thought I need to probably go away, get into a really good red brick university. Luckily, they were willing to sort of accept me, and I went up there, and it was, if I'm honest, it was the best move I ever made. I did a whole year of playing university rugby and just making mates and whatever else. And then Newcastle Falcons came knocking on the door the year later. So it was a sort of natural progression for me to move up there, and it was a great club. And that was where my sort of affinity for the Northeast began, was at Durham, and then Newcastle after that for about 6-7 years.
What were you studying at Durham?
I did a BA in business up there. So I went up to sort of, I'll be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I came out of school. I wanted to play rugby, and then it all has gone a bit Pete Tong. So I thought I better try and right these wrongs. LSE were not that fussed about having me in on a BBD, and thankfully Durham, who I guess liked their rugby a bit more as well, were up for having me in. And so I managed to get in through clearing on a good course, and the rest is history. Kind of, I sort of made sure I came away with the 2-1, and I loved it. And that was, if I'm honest, that was a really critical decision. I think it's quite unfair as an 18-year-old that you've got to make some, the your A levels and the results are a fairly pivotal moment in your life that really can impact on the direction of travel that you go. And I think it's quite unfair, because I just don't think you're mature enough at that age to really appreciate the sort of magnitude of what's going on. And there's so much happening in your life at that point in time that's for these letters that you get at the end of your A-level exams or whatever else will dictate the university you go to, the type of job that you get, which will then determine probably the course and trajectory that your life goes in, right? And that's quite big. It's quite a big moment. And so I was fortunate. I'm very, very grateful that A, Durham allowed me, and B, that I guess I had a bit of a moment of sort of reflection to say, look, actually go and get a degree. And by me getting a 2-1, it meant that I actually managed to get into Cambridge 10 years on, or 12 years, 15 years on from that date, to do my executive MBA. If I hadn't had a 2-1, if I had a 2-2, I wouldn't have been accepted. And if I hadn't had a degree, I probably would have struggled to get my job at PwC. And it's just ironic how that moment in time, at such a young, immature age, to be honest with you, is so pivotal in determining the direction that your life takes.
Interesting. And then, so pretty quick. So that's from there. You signed. Was it professional contracts by then? It was all professional contracts. So you signed officially for Newcastle at that point?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it was. I mean, it wasn't the glitz and glamour of professional contracts that some people might think. I signed on £600 a month at that point in time. So, it wasn't that sort of rock and roll. I was definitely not out wild partying all day long. But
at least you could do rugby full time, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was still a student as well at that point too. So, £600 a month for a student is, I mean, you're pretty much Warren Buffett, right? You can wander around cash money all over the place. So, so it was amazing. I had such a brilliant time. Rob Andrew was one that brought me in, and it was, if I'm honest, it was the perfect club for me to be at. Awesome city, great community atmosphere, small enough to sort of still feel like homely, but a big enough city to be sort of quite cosmopolitan. So it was absolutely perfect, to be honest.
Am I right in saying Johnny Wilkinson was there when you were there as well?
Yeah.
You played
that was obviously a big deciding. Well, I mean, yeah, it was a deciding factor for me staying up in the Northeast. Definitely. I mean, I finished and graduated in 2004 from Durham. Obviously, I, just like everyone else in the UK, had just watched Wilco kick the winning drop goal in 2003 for England to win a World Cup, and he arguably was at that point in time, well, the best player in the world, if not of all time, or whatever else. And the opportunity to go to a club that had him there, that had those sort of aspirations, as particularly as a back three player, playing with somebody like that was, a major influencer, coupled with the fact that we had some unbelievable talent coming through in the academy that I was sort of part of. And now when I reflect back, we had Jeff Parling, who went on to become a British and Irish Lion, a guy called Ben Woods, who became England Saxons, Lee Dixon played for full England, Phil Dowson played for full England, Davey Wilson was prop for England, Rob Vickers got England Saxons. So all these players that were with me in the academy, that Matt Tate, Toby Flood, now you look back at it like, wow, we were seriously talented. We were unbelievable. But, at the time we were just all sort of having a bit of crack and taking the mick out of each other and playing Monday night football for the second team. But it was, that was another influencing factor, was we were a really tight group of people, and it was some great friends.
What was, just out of interest, you're playing there with Wilkinson. What was he like to play with, and what was his training regime? Because there's so many stories around how he practiced and, tried that drop goal. Yeah, obsessive. What was that like?
I mean, Wilco just kept himself. Wilco really kept himself to himself. He didn't, force himself onto anyone, but he sort of set the example, if that makes sense. If anything, he maybe set an example of how not to do it too, right? Because it ultimately consumed him, and in the end, he had to do a whole load of work in terms of just resolving a sort of mental, emotive state. But it was quite frankly, it was remarkable. Like, I have just never seen anyone with that level of determination, commitment, focus, and it was a disorder, right? He was obsessed. I mean, I remember where we would fit. I'd like to train hard. I'd do my extras and everything else like that, but nothing compared to what he was like. I mean, we would finish training and you'd be pretty knackered at 4 o'clock in the evening or 5 o'clock in the evening or something. Go home, have your dinner. I remember I did this. I went home, had a dinner, chilled out, watched the TV for a bit, and realised we'd run out of milk or something. So I went to the 24-hour Tesco's that I know is next to the club. Drove all the way there. Realised the lights were still on the pitch, and I was like, "Oh God, I forgot. I'd done some kicking at the end of the session with Wilco." So I was like, "Oh, we must have forgotten to turn them off." So I pulled up into the club to turn the lights off and everything else like that, the floodlights. And Wilco, this was 9:30, 10 o'clock. Wilco was still on the field. Still on the field, kicking at goal. And he would set things up in his mind where he had to sort of kick 10 from a certain place, 10 from another place, 10 from another place, 10 from another place. And if he missed one, he'd start all over again. And it was just, I mean, he was phenomenal, right? That's why he became, in terms of performance, the highest point scorer of all time. But I mean, it was obsessive. And I mean, he kicked so much that at one point, I remember they told him he had to stop kicking because he'd actually detached the muscle from his bone on his groin on the inside, because his foot had obviously just been going through that motion so often that the muscle was coming away from the bone. So, I mean, that's the price you pay, if you like, for being one of the greatest players of all time, of definitely one of the greatest English players of all time. But I think he would openly admit that he missed a huge opportunity to actually enjoy a lot of this stuff. So, I'm not saying he didn't, but I think he was so consumed with this sort of notion of being the best and not letting his teammates down, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that in the end he missed it. You know what I mean? The opportunity of a lifetime only exists within that lifetime of the opportunity, and it's a finite one. It's, for Wilco, I think he started at 18 and finished at whatever he was, 32, 34, right? So 16-year career. So that's not that's a long time, but that's not massive, and you can blink and it's gone. And I think if you ask him, there'd probably be elements of it that he wished if he could go back, he'd just sort of relax a bit more and just be present and live in the moment and not worry too much about the small stuff.
Interesting. It's interesting because the psychology of people who are incredibly successful. I always think about Tyson Fury, who, worked his way all the way through to the Deontay Wilder fight, and he was 27, I'm going to say, and he'd worked religiously towards that fight to win the world champion, to become the world champion boxer, and then in the years preceding that, he then suffered mental health, all these difficult things, depression because he wasn't prepared for the after. And this happens, I suppose. It's part of that journey. So I can certainly understand that. Let's bring the conversation back to yourself. From that, how quickly was it then before you started then being part of the England setup?
I was lucky. 6 months.
Wow,
6 months of me being there. Yeah. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire. I'd come off the back of a sort of bumper season the year before in the sort of academy second team. And I think I'd scored something like, I'd only got a chance with Newcastle very late doors in the season. Like, there was someone that got injured, and I think they pulled me in for the last 4 games or something. And in those final 3 games, I scored a hat trick in every game. And I think off the back of that, I think Rob Andrew was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, who's this kid that's scored 9 tries in 3 games or whatever? Like, that's a good return." And then he drafted me in for pre-season with the first team. Our first game of the season was against Glasgow away, and I didn't start, but I came off the bench and I scored 2 off the bench. And then I started the week later against Llanelli and scored again. And then the season started, and I played against Saracens away, my first ever game in the Premiership, and I scored in that as well. And so from there on, it just was, I don't know, just a natural progression. And then December there was a squad meeting, an England squad meeting. And I'd been on a few training camps with them or whatever, and was obviously getting excited, but I didn't think I'd have a chance straight away to get called up, because the list of talent was unbelievable. We had Tom Varndell, Hugo Monnier, Richard Horton, Henry Paul, Pete Richards, all these sort of amazing players. And Mike Friday called me up for Dubai. So I went to Dubai in South Africa, and never looked back, really. It was just... And we won. It was the tournament that I went to, my first ever tournament in Dubai. We won, which was absolutely, incredible, really, to be honest.
What was your debut like? The first time you went out playing, that first time thinking...
it was... my first game ever was against Zimbabwe, for England, that was. and I scored 3 in that game. But I mean, it's probably not that hard to score 3 against Zimbabwe on a 7's field. But to be honest, I didn't care who I was playing against. I was just so proud of one of those pinch me moments of running out in Dubai, amazing, playing for England, hearing the national anthem, and looking around and seeing all these players that I've just been like watching on TV and thinking and idolizing, watching Henry Poole run out, whatever it was, 6 months earlier for England in a Six Nations decider and everything else. And here I am sort of playing with them and, meriting my place. Just special, right? 6 months out of university as well, where, university was structured around like going to Clute and God knows what, which is the nightclub in Durham, and just sort of living off beans on toast. And suddenly I'm out in Dubai playing for England, and that's why I think sport's such a magical place, because your circumstances and your reality, if you like, can change so quickly. And as long as you're up for the change, if that makes sense, as long as you embrace it, it's just an awesome place to be.
What would you say from your experience? Obviously, you played for England in the 15s or whatever, and then you also, of course, you end up becoming more specialist around the 7s. What's the big transition there, or what's the difference in kind of why did you think that maybe at 7s it worked so well for you, and you were able to play and win so much?
I just think it's time on the ball, right? I just think you get more. I think what I loved about 7s, I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the big game 15s games, like European Cup finals, big knockout games, or they're just local derbies. There's something about them that are really, really special, right? But as a winger, obviously it changes from game to game, but in general, it's a pretty boring existence in general. Not because you just don't get that much ball, right? In order for it to get to you, it needs to go through about sort of 6 pairs of hands, or you need to be sort of ferreting around in amongst it, or somebody's going to put a box kick up on you. So it's, I guess touches of the ball. It can
be a lonely game out there, can't it?
Occasionally, in Newcastle in January, February, it definitely can be when it's absolutely Baltic and sometimes snowing. It's a real lonely place on the wing. But I think I just enjoyed, having whatever it was, 40, 50 touches of a ball in a game on a 7's field, as opposed to on a 15's field where you might get 5. And, obviously every time you get the ball, you want to make an impression, you want to do something with it all and everything else like that. And on a 7's field, there was more space, so you could have more impact, you get more touches of the ball. I love that feeling of like having to be so sort of super fit and everything else like that. So it was just, I guess I just took to it more. But I still, for me, the 2 games are not standalone. The 2 games have got loads of sort of loads of synergies between them, and loads of things that are complementary to one another. So I thoroughly enjoyed my transition between the 2. If I came back from a 7's tour, I'd come back to Newcastle, I'd be playing on that weekend, and it would be 15s, and I would love how sort of sharp I'd feel, and and then putting some of the 7's exposes all your one-on-one tackling, all of your core skill, execution, your kicking, your handling. So I loved all of that.
When you're there, you're playing top level rugby. You mentioned about the needing to be, as fit as possible, etc. And it's obviously a very fast game. What was your training regime like at that time?
Horrific.
to be
horrific, yeah, horrific, but brilliant. I'm one of those sort of sadistic people that buzzes off that sort of feeling where you're absolutely hanging and you can't feel your legs and your lungs and everything else like that. I relish that sort of feeling. So I took loads and loads of like pride and focus in. Like at one point, I was sort of number 1 in our England fitness test, for example. So I loved that element of it.
What did that consist of? What did you have to do for it?
Basically, just totally end yourself. So it'd be a mix between like a yo-yo test, sometimes this thing called a bronco, and then the worst one was you had to do this up-down sprint 10 meters round the cone, back, up-down, sprint round the cone, then sprint forward, off to the left and round and back, and that would be 1 rep. And the faster you did it, they would count how long it would take you to do that one, and it would be a cumulative score. And you had so the first one you'd have allocated 40 seconds, so you'd get back in 20 seconds from doing all that stuff. You'd have 20 seconds recovery, and you would go 1 1 1, and then you'd have 2 reps, 1 rep. And by the end, you were just buckled. And then normally with the sevens environment, you get 2-minute rest and you do it all again. Yeah, I mean, it was not enjoyable. But and everyone, did it make you a better rugby player? No. But psychologically, it took you to a place that you knew if you could go there and you could conquer it, and you could be comfortable at that level of sort of discomfort, you would be fine in a game. You would never get to that level in a game ever. And if you did, it would be very short-lived. And as a result of that, you could take loads of comfort and pride and security and knowledge in the fact that, look, I know I can go to these sorts of places that are well beyond what's required in game time. And I know I can operate and I can still perform and I can still be sort of, delivering or excellent in my position. And so that meant that you could just bring a different level of intensity to how you played.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's the difference between, amateur rugby potentially and then going into the professional game. I'm sure that is related to other sports as well, which is probably just having that depth of, you know that you've kind of broken yourself, but you're not going to actually end up breaking yourself to that level in a game. What was kind of, when you're really in these training sessions, I suppose, and think about the week, like how much is tactical and you're with the ball versus, right, there's running, there's training, there's weights. How is it all structured and put together? Because obviously you've got to optimize, but there's also a point of resting and trying to recover and be ready for Saturday. How is that all working?
I mean, normally you would play on a Saturday or Sunday, and then the day after, whatever day that was, the Sunday or the Monday, I mean, you pretty much feel like you've been in a car crash. So it's very low intensity, in a swimming pool, on a bike, just trying to flush all your muscles out, get all the aches and pains out, any knocks or niggles, get them sorted. You're then sort of progressing through to sort of a Tuesday where the intensity is going up a bit more. You probably do some weights in the morning and a training session in the afternoon with ball skills and tactics, but still quite low intensity. Then Wednesday would be the big one, where it would be like, okay, we're going to raise it up again, an upper gear in. You've probably shaken off the effects from the weekend. By that point, you're starting to feel a bit more normal, and you'll have a weight session, a tactics session. You're probably going to do some skills on your own, and then you'll be out training again, and then you probably do some more skills. And then Thursday will be off, Friday will be the team run, and then you go all again. And it was just that sort of rinse and repeat. And if you did some extras, I mean, I would do quite a few extras or whatever, whether it be weights or kicking or whatever, but that were role specific for me. But I mean, half the challenge for a lot of rugby players is just the management of your body, right? Because it's just such the Saturday Night Lights. It's just so physical, right? It just your body is absolutely broken. Not always, obviously, but it was a really physical game. You know about it. I remember I sort of stopped playing for 2 years or whatever, and you get invited to play in these like Legends games, basically all these old fogies games where you will try and pretend you're young again. So I played in this Legends game, loved it, brilliant to sort of be back in a change room with the lads and feeling that sort of vibe again. And I played the game, and I came off a few beers with them at the end, brilliant to catch up there. And I woke up the next morning, I just turned to my wife, I was like, I can't move. I mean, literally, I can't move. My neck, my shoulders, everything. I just never felt anything like it. And I was like, I cannot believe. I mean, obviously the intensity of a Legends game is way below what we were playing at. And I was like, I cannot believe that my body was just, I should do this every week for 12 years. But I loved it. Would I change it? Not a chance. Not a chance. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Just the greatest experience in life.
Brilliant. And then, so you're playing for England. How do you go from you're breaking into the team, you're beginning to play well, to becoming the captain for the Sevens team? What's the jump and the leap to when does that happen? Or how does that happen?
I mean, it's kind of a natural progression, I guess. And I think it's also, it just depends on the mood music at the time, right? And it's more the characteristics and personality traits that you demonstrate, the way that you sort of work and collaborate within the team, how people sort of view you and respect you and whatever else. And being blunt, like also what the perceptions are of the coach at that given time. At the end of the day, it's one person that's going to say, Simon, you're captain, or Ollie, you're captain. And And fortunately, at my point in time, a guy called Ben Ryan felt that I brought my sort of style of leadership and captaincy is a lot around positivity and trying to make everybody feel good, a lot of energy and believing, a belief in that you can win. And for me, my leadership style was all around the sort of psychology of being victorious and imagining and role playing that you're doing it and it's happened already. So you're kind of the architect of your design, of your own design. Whereas
you're sort of manifesting the result, the victory already in some ways.
Yeah, trying to make people believe that it's our, whatever you want to call it, destiny or our right, our belief. It's already happened for us. So we just need to go and execute the plan, kind of thing. So mine was all around that focal point of like, we're a bloody good team, and this is written in the stars for us to do this. It's down to us really, and making them believe that, really honestly believe that was our, whatever you call it, destiny or our capability. And whereas there's loads of other styles of leadership that people can deploy, and for mine, it just seemed to resonate with Ben Ryan at that point in time.
Like, you led teams, have been captain of teams in the past?
No, well, yeah. I mean, at school I had done, and at my county and whatever else, but not probably for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Actually, it's like at Durham, I had been, either in a position of leadership or responsibility or a captain at certain stages of that. So I guess all the way through my teens and my sort of young adolescence, I had been in positions of responsibility, but nothing like captaining your country is just a different.
Because there's nothing that really can prepare you for it. But then that was the interesting thing to me, to thinking that, okay, so maybe at school or college or whatever, you had been a captain, but then now to be, if you don't mind me saying, probably widely regarded as England's greatest ever Sevens captain, leading them to numerous victories and World Series, etc. It's you took the team on a long journey, on a great journey under your captaincy.
Yeah, but I think it would be fairly, well, I'd be wrong if I'm honest and arrogant for me to say that was me. I think it was, as always with these things, you need things to. There's a lot of things that need to be in place if you like for that to happen. So it was a perfect time for me personally. Like I was 25, 26. I was at my peak. I was really peaking in terms of my own personal performance and my own, if you like, levels of maturity. But I definitely wasn't the finished article, and there are some things I reflect on in my captaincy that I wish I hadn't done, as always. But there are lots of things I was super proud about. Equally, the number of, and this is probably the more relevant one point, is the players that were in that group were there were 4 or 5 that were definitely, if not the best, in the top 3 players in the world for their position at that point in time. And therefore, to be honest, leading them was a pretty easy task, right? When you've got all the best players and you've got a really great vibe and purpose and values and belief statement between everybody, that's the, if you like, the little 2%er that really just ignites and lights the litmus paper for everybody to perform to their optimal. And then you couple that with, at that point in time, England really funding this program, the coaches being fully invested into it and really understanding the strengths and weaknesses of all the individuals, and as a result of that, it just, all the stars aligned, and we had a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal run where we were ranked number 1 side in the world. But even within that same breath, there's a few regrets, but not regrets because they're just learnings, but experiences that I wish it could have gone the other way. Like, we didn't win the World Cup in 2009, the 7's World Cup, and we should have walked that World Cup. It was, we watched the other top 4 in the world, New Zealand, Fiji, and South Africa, all crash out in the quarterfinals, and we were the final quarterfinal coming up against Samoa. And for the first time, I think, in that particular moment in our journey, we just became complacent, and just were not on our game. And as a result of that, we got turned over in extra time in sudden death, like killer point by Samoa, and we witnessed. I don't mean it's disrespectfully to Wales, but we witnessed Wales to go on and win the World Cup, Sevens World Cup, and at that point in time, they were like a pub team. I mean, they were a pub team. They were out on the smash like 2 nights before the tournament started. So it's it just wasn't. But you you can't reflect on these things and be like, oh, it's a it was a disaster and blah blah blah, because it wasn't. It was all part of the experience, and I'm just grateful that I was there to enjoy be there at that point in time for that roller coaster ride, because the England side now is not the same in terms of, there's still some great guys and some great players, but they're not the best team in the world. They're not in the top 4 in the world. Whereas we were number 1 in the world.
What strikes me about you, Ollie, is that through and through, over your career, you're a winner, and you've been agile with that winning approach, mentality, because also, as we spoke at the very beginning, you have 4 world records. So let's talk through some of those, because it's interesting that you can be so successful in rugby and then also apply yourself to then really different fields. Obviously, you're a director at PwC as well, really different field together, but of course, benefiting from, I suppose, your business degree. Let's talk through those world records.
Well, they've all been centered around fundraising, charities, etc., etc. But because I basically decided when I finished playing, I wanted to go and do a load of sort of philanthropic stuff. I still needed the challenge of overcoming sort of training for something, overcoming an obstacle, etc., etc. And doing it for charity was the right thing to do, and etc., etc. And so I just loved it. And the 4 world records that we set were for the most northerly game of rugby ever played in history at the North Pole. 2 of the highest games of rugby ever played in history on Mount Everest, for the highest game of touch and the highest game of contact rugby. And the other one was for a mental health campaign where we created the largest, it was all about the largest human mouth in history, but it was all centered around championing mental health and getting people to speak out about their mental health issues.
And did you, at the beginning, did you set out and say, right, these are the specific world records that we wanted to go and get, and say, right, let's build the team around it and go out? Because of course you were heavily involved with the leadership around those.
No, I mean, not really. But basically, the first one came about, the North Pole one came about when I got approached by the Wooden Spoon. It was a children's charity that I was sort of an ambassador for, and they said, look, the World Cup's coming up. We want to sort of put the charity on the map, all this sort of stuff, and we want to go and differentiate it by doing something extreme and setting a Guinness World Record. And so that's where it sort of came from. And they were like, look, we'd like you to. Initially, I was going as the referee, and then Pat Sanderson pulled out, so they said, we'd like you to be the captain. So I was like, okay, fine. And it was just amazing, to be honest. But we led this group of people that I'd never met before in my life to go and do something obviously never ever been done before, and go to a place that is probably not my typical type of holiday destination in the North Pole. But I just love the mystique about it, how different it was, the challenge, but both the physical, but also this sort of mental, emotional challenge of sort of going up there with, how many were we in there? 18 people that I didn't know, never met before, and doing something remarkable, right? Pulling off the unexpected. And it's just started from there. That was the first one, and from there they just grew and grew and grew. Once, I think it's always these things, like someone's seen me go around the world, they're like, bloody hell, he's a lunatic, he sailed around the world, I bet he'd be up for this. So then they come forward and they're like, would you like to do this? You're like, yeah, I would. And then it just sort of snowballs. You get almost guilty by association, because they're like, well, who would like to go and stand on Timbuktu on their head for 5 hours or whatever? Oh, Ollie be up for it. And they ask you, and you're not always up for it, but more often than not, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. So
let's talk about sailing around the world. How do you prepare and train and get yourself ready mentally and physically to do something like that? And how long did it take?
Well, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it the way I did it, because I got injured at a World Cup, a 7's World Cup in Moscow in 2013. And that was when they told me it's all over, Red Rover. And that was in July. And they said, look, that's your career over. And I was 29 at the time. I thought I was going to be able to go to Rio, to the Olympics, and play for GB and sort of hang up my boots at that point. That was my sort of ambition. So that was a massive curveball day. But within 5 weeks of that news coming, I was on a boat sailing around the world, or sailing to Rio de Janeiro.
Have you done much sailing before then?
Never before. Never been on a boat in my life.
Wow.
So, my preparation was not ideal, right? It's, what I would definitely not recommend it is in terms of sort of, preparation for most things, or definitely for not sailing around the world. But you had so much time on the boat that you learn pretty quick, right? I mean, the London to Rio de Janeiro was a 28-day crossing. And so by the time I came back, having sailed 46,000 miles and been away from home and been on the ocean for 11 months, I mean, I knew how to sail. I definitely learned how to sail at that point. And it was, for me, it was one of the most humbling experiences I'd ever been on. I'd come into that environment probably with a bit of bravado, a bit of ego, off the back of like being England rugby captain. I can sort of do anything, but underneath it, deep down, knowing, well, you haven't got a bloody clue about what you're doing here, and being nervous and being anxious about it all. Not only about the physical challenge of it, but also the mental challenge of I don't know any of these people, and how am I gonna get on? Am I gonna get on with anybody? And is this gonna work? And so all of that was a huge challenge, but an amazing one, and a great, if you like, evolutionary process for me to go through, that's made me realize that actually leading people and leading teams, there's so much more to it. There's so much more, and there's so much more complexity to it than what I had originally experienced or thought was the case having captaining England. Because the reality of captaining England is everyone's the same age, roughly. Everyone's the same sex. Everyone's the same marital status. Everyone's roughly got the same sort of priorities and focus in life. Everyone is single-minded, determined to be a professional rugby player. And you've got this amazing carrot of representing your country hanging over the top of them that pretty much means that they'll throw themselves off a cliff if asked to, right? So leading that group of people was really not that challenging. Like, lads, we're going to go out today and we're going to run through a brick wall. No problem. I'll do it for you. Whereas when I was on the boat, I was like, team, we're going to go out today. It's a ridiculously stormy day, but we're going to be up on deck. And someone said, well, I don't want to be up on deck. Like, well, of course you do. Well, why? Well, because we're sailing for GB. Well, I'm not an international sailor. It's, blah, blah, blah. So it just made me realize that actually there's so many other rationales and reasons for why people are there. Right. And what makes people move is actually the critical bit to understand, like, why are they here? What's their reasons for being? And if you can understand that, then you're onto a winner.
How's that then related into your current business, Optimist Performance? And how are you doing with it so far since taking off? I'm going to say a couple of years ago, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was going absolutely great guns up until probably March of last year, obviously, when COVID hit, and then it all fell off a cliff because being in person and sharing stories and leadership methodologies and whatever else like that it wasn't possible to do anymore, and the market wasn't mature enough to do it virtually, or accepting enough to do it virtually and whatever else. Fast forward on 9 months, and it had matured. So now it's going really, really well, and people are needing, if you like, some help and guidance and support around. Look, I've got loads of disparate people all over the world that we're trying to live our lives through a computer screen. I can't build up that sort of rapport that I used to build up. And can you help me? Like, can you help me with my team? Equally within the team, look, can you help me around just feeling comfortable in my new environment and trusting in the process, and actually still sort of feeling valued? How do we create value for each other? All of those sorts of things, given the context of the situation that we're in. And that's what I've loved. That's what I relish and really enjoy, is the art of like helping people discover and achieve their optimum, their optimal performance, but from a behavioral perspective, from a psychological perspective, all of that sort of stuff. Like, how can we help you be the best version of you?
I mean, this must be the hardest time, the most challenging time in leadership, and the changing time, because of course, we all in COVID for the foreseeable future, or lockdown, or I don't know if we're in lockdown 2 or 3 or permanent at the moment. And it must be the hardest thing to corral your team, and they're all pointing in different directions and they're all working through Zoom. How are you kind of approaching working with some of these big companies?
I mean, great question. I think it starts from a level of like authenticity, like genuine authenticity around your messaging, right? That people need to believe and trust that you are genuine and authentic in what you're saying to people, so that they believe and trust in the fact that you've got their best interest at heart. So, before you could probably get away with and hide behind like performance metrics or revenue or whatever it might be, right? Whereas now they're still there, those still pressures are there, but Simon's sitting in his lounge at home. He's got a whole world of other problems that are in his mind that's stressing him out, from like, am I going to catch COVID? Are my kids okay? Are my kids getting the education and exposure that they need to? Like, what about my family? What about my job? Is it secure? Is it safe? All of these sorts of things that fill the mind with doubt, and therefore a distraction away from excelling and achieving their own true, optimal performance, right? And their true potential. And the great leaders of this time are those that can cut through all that crap and say, look, we're in this together. We're in the trenches here together, and I understand and resonate, and I can relate to the stresses that you're going through, but I also understand where you want to get to in terms of your career progression and what things are important to you and what you value. And I've got empathy and sympathy for you and some of your problems or whatever else. And therefore, by me being able to sort of truly relate and connect with what's going on in your world, you'll feel valued and you'll trust in me to deliver on my promises, which is of helping you, right? And as a result of that, if you believe in me and trust in me, when I ask you to do something, you'll be more inclined to do it. Like, you'll feel like you're part of a team, you'll feel valued, you'll feel incentivized to serve that common goal, that common purpose, because Ollie's got your back, and equally you've got my back. And that's what's so important now, right? You want to believe and trust in the people around you, that the decisions they're making are in your best interest, in your family's best interest, in the community's best interest. And that can only be achieved by being totally honest, transparent, authentic, and genuine in the things that you say, and then backing them up with the things that you do.
I couldn't agree more. I think this is the time where leadership have to be more, if it's even possible, be more transparent, more trustworthy, more having that integrity. You've got to be really, really close now, and not just. I mean, it's that transparency on a real business and also personal level, because we're all going through something, and it's probably sharing that piece as well. I think, it's really interesting. So I think that's really right on the money right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is that people want to feel. I keep saying this word authentic, right? But I think there's a misbelief at the moment that leaders need to know all the answers. And as a result of that, they try and, I mean, you see it when they do it, right? But they basically try and make something up because they don't know themselves, right? I think people buy people, right? And if you don't know, they appreciate you saying, look, I don't know, but I will find out. Like, I don't know, but I will try and find out, and I'll try and come up with a solution that helps serves the best interests of everyone involved. Right? People appreciate that honesty as you go through.
I'd rather that, an authentic answer. Listen, I don't know. We're in new grounds. We'll figure it out. Let's find out. I'd rather that than someone give me an answer that just doesn't make any sense. Or you can see behind, or you just think, well, that's not researched, or you're not really sure on the answer. I'd rather have an authentic one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And where people trip themselves up is that they try and fudge it, or they try and pretend that they are the font of all knowledge, and that they know best, etc., etc., etc. And all it does is undermine your own credibility, undermine the trust in you, and then before you know it, you're gone, right? You've lost everything. I mean, so I think authentic leadership is absolutely paramount right now, and that comes with a level of honesty and integrity that is just unparalleled. It can't be questioned, and I think if you can do that, people will follow you to the grave.
We are quickly approaching bath time.
We are. The bubbles are going in the background. We love it.
Indeed, they are. We're both going to have to exit, because we both got to go off and look after a little. How have you been coping as a parent during COVID? As a final question.
Well, I mean, I guess you can look at it for one of two ways, right? You could be stressed at, not being able to do all the things that you need to get done, which is definitely I can relate to. But I guess I've just got gratitude, to be honest. I'm just really grateful that I've got this time, right? I've got this. I mean, if it wasn't for this pandemic, I would be probably commuting in and out of London. I'd be leaving at 7, coming back at 7. I'd be missing bath time. I'd be missing them waking up. I'd probably miss the whole shebang. And I'd see them on a Saturday and Sunday, and I'd probably be distracted by, knowing I've got to do something else the following day, or, I've got something to cover off for work. Whereas I'm grateful that I'm at home every day. I get to see them. I get to see them wake up. I can mess around with them now. I could do bath time. I get to see all the amazing bits. Like I saw my little daughter walk for the first time, whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And if I was working, I would have missed all that. And life's about memories, right? Life's about stories. Life's about creating memories. So when you lie down on your deathbed, you're like, wow, what a ride, what a rush. And do you remember when we did this? Do you remember when you did that? No one gives a monkeys about, all the trophies and silverware or whatever you've got on the side, because it doesn't mean anything, right? So it's about that. And for me, I try and wake up every morning and think about the things that I'm grateful for, and then I look over to my right, I see my wife, and then I also hear my 1-year-old screaming and probably roll my eyes, and then think, oh, you know what? I'm just grateful that I'm here. Like, I'm grateful that I get to see her. I'm grateful that I get to pick her up and calm her down, and why not?
What's harder, being a new parent, or being a parent with young children, or playing for England?
I mean, being a parent is one of the hardest things in the world, right? Because it's just relentless. But it's also one of the most rewarding things. If you'd asked me the other question, would I rather play for England or have my 2 kids? My cats will be given back in a second. But they're different, right? It's just special memories. But I mean, nothing substitutes for it's a lifetime of hard work with your children, right? Because you want the best for them, whatever. But it's also the most rewarding process as well.
I can concur. We've got little Logan. He's 14 weeks old, and 5:30 is his bath time. And I'm the same situation, by the way, which was I was traveling constantly, for work into London and out of London, etc. And COVID has given us this opportunity to have time. So now since Logan's been here, I get to do bath time every day.
Good man. Well, look, I won't delay you any longer. Enjoy and send my very best to Logan.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you, Ollie. Enjoy bath time. Thanks so much for your time. Great to talk to you.